What if I told you that the son of the King of England just lost everything? Not in a quiet legal process or a private family meeting, but in one of the most shocking royal moves of the century. What if, tonight, Prince Harry, once the world's most beloved royal rebel, was no longer His Royal Highness at all? That's right. The unthinkable has just happened. King Charles III has officially stripped Prince Harry of his remaining royal titles and, even more devastatingly, removed him from the line of succession. The news broke in the dead of night. Buckingham Palace, normally silent after sunset, was lit up like a Christmas tree. Insiders whispered of a secret meeting called by the king himself, a meeting that stretched into the early hours of the morning. Something serious was happening behind those gilded doors. Something that would not only tear apart a family, but shake the very foundation of the British monarchy. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. For years, the cracks have been visible. From Harry and Meghan's dramatic exit from royal life, to their explosive interviews accusing the palace of betrayal, to the bombshell Netflix series that made the Windsors look more like a reality TV family than a dynasty of tradition. But even after all that, despite the bitterness, the distance, and the silence, no one thought it would ever come to this. So what pushed King Charles to finally act? Was it political pressure? A new scandal? Or something far more personal? Something that cut deep enough to make a father renounce his own son? The world woke up to headlines that didn't seem real. King Charles removes Harry from succession. Prince no more. The monarchy purges the rebel duke. Social media exploded. Some celebrated the decision as long overdue, calling it justice for years of royal defiance. Others were horrified, accusing the king of heartlessness, of destroying what little family unity remained after Queen Elizabeth's death. But behind all the noise and outrage, there's a story that few understand. A story that begins not with revenge, but with fear. You see, this wasn't a sudden outburst of royal pride. This was the end result of months, perhaps years, of quiet investigation, strategic maneuvering, and mounting tension between father and son. And tonight, it finally boiled over. Imagine the scene inside the palace. Heavy drapes drawn, the king seated at his mahogany desk, his fountain pen poised over an envelope marked confidential. Outside, the rain taps against the windows. Inside, silence thick enough to choke on. He's not signing just any paper. He's signing away a legacy, a bloodline connection stretching back centuries. In that single moment, duty triumphs over love. And when the ink dries, the monarchy itself will never be the same. The question isn't just what happened. It's why now? Why, after years of scandal, would King Charles wait until this very moment to make the most ruthless decision of his reign? According to insiders, the answer lies in a confidential intelligence report delivered to Buckingham Palace just days ago. A report that revealed something so damaging, so unprecedented, that even the king's closest advisors urged immediate action. But what could possibly be so serious that it would force a father to publicly disown his own son? Some say it's financial, alleged misuse of funds connected to charities once associated with the Sussexes. Others whisper about secret communications with figures that the British government considers sensitive. Still others suggest the real reason lies closer to home, a betrayal inside the royal circle itself. Whatever the truth is, one thing's certain: this wasn't just a royal punishment. This was a royal message, a warning to anyone who dares to challenge the crown from within. And that message? No one, not even the king's own flesh and blood, is above the monarchy. Let's take a step back for a moment. Remember when Queen Elizabeth was alive? Despite everything, she never fully cut Harry off. She loved her grandson, even when he embarrassed the family. She believed, perhaps naively, that time would heal all wounds, that someday Harry would find his way home. But King Charles is a different kind of monarch. Where his mother ruled with patience and quiet endurance, he rules with calculation and image. And right now, his image is under siege, from the media, from critics, even from his own government. The pressure has been mounting since day one. Parliament has quietly questioned the monarchy's relevance in modern Britain. Commonwealth nations are openly discussing independence. The king's popularity, while respectable, is nowhere near the universal affection his mother commanded. And then there's the constant shadow of scandal, most of it tied, directly or indirectly, to Harry and Meghan. Every time their names appear in the press, it reflects on the crown. Every accusation, every documentary, every tell-all seems to chip away at the royal mystique. At first, Charles tried to ignore it. He gave interviews about unity, spoke of healing the rift, and told aides that Harry will always be my son. But insiders say the tone changed earlier this year, when private palace documents were leaked to the media, documents that were never meant to see daylight. Documents that allegedly included internal memos about royal finances, security expenses, and private correspondence between the king and government officials. The palace launched a quiet investigation. Weeks later, reports began circulating that the source of the leaks had been traced to someone close to the Sussex household. No names were publicly mentioned, but the implication was clear. And behind the scenes, the king's patience snapped. Sources claim that the final straw came just days ago, when the king was handed a sealed folder marked "Eyes Only." Inside, they say, were intelligence findings from MI6, findings linking Prince Harry to undisclosed contacts and transactions that raised serious national security concerns. We don't yet know the full contents of that file, but what we do know is this. After reading it, Charles ordered a private council meeting that lasted more than 4 hours. When he emerged, he was pale, silent, and visibly shaken. That same evening, he called Prince William. Witnesses say the two men spoke for nearly an hour. One palace insider described the tone as grave, like the kind of conversation that ends dynasties. By the end of that call, the decision was made. Now picture this. The following morning, a royal messenger arrives at Clarence's house. The king, still in his robe, signs the papers that would strip Harry of all remaining royal privileges. The document is then sealed with the royal crest and sent to the Prime Minister for constitutional verification. Within hours, the machinery of monarchy turns. Officials brief the media, lawyers prepare statements, and the palace communications team drafts the announcement that will soon dominate headlines worldwide. Meanwhile, across the Atlantic, in Montecito, California, Harry wakes up to dozens of missed calls. Aides are panicking. Meghan is pacing. They've heard whispers, but nothing concrete. Then, as the morning sun breaks over their estate, a news alert flashes across the television. King Charles III formally removes Prince Harry from royal succession. Imagine that silence. Imagine the weight of realizing that the crown that once promised you everything has now erased you entirely. And yet, for all the heartbreak, there's something chillingly inevitable about it. This was not just a personal rift, it was a ticking time bomb. For years, Harry's defiance has been both admired and despised. He's been the rebel prince, the truth-teller, the man unafraid to challenge the system that raised him. But in the world of monarchy, truth-telling comes at a price. And tonight, that bill has finally come due. The royal family's motto, "Never complain, never explain," has long kept their internal wars hidden from the public. But now, for the first time, the family feud isn't just tabloid gossip. It's official. It's historical. It's documented by royal decree. And what's more unsettling is what this decision reveals about the state of the monarchy itself. If a father can erase his son to protect the institution, what does that say about the crown's future? Is the monarchy now a family, or merely a corporation protecting its brand? These are the questions shaking Britain tonight. And yet, deep inside the palace, where centuries of portraits stare down from gilded walls, there's an even more haunting question being whispered by those who witnessed it firsthand. What did King Charles read in that file that made him act so swiftly, so decisively, and so coldly? Whatever it wasn't ordinary. It wasn't just another tabloid rumor or private argument. It was something darker, heavier, perhaps even dangerous enough to justify cutting ties once and for all. As the royal crest was stamped on that decree, the king reportedly turned to his private secretary and said 5 words that no one will ever forget. "He's left me no choice." But here's the part that chills even royal insiders. The decision wasn't made out of rage. It was made out of fear. Fear of what might come next. Fear that Harry's continued association with the monarchy could invite scandal, exposure, or worse, national embarrassment. And for King Charles, that was a risk he could no longer take. Still, one question remains. What happens to the monarchy now that the royal family has cut out one of its own? Can the institution survive such a public fracture? And what of the brothers, William and Harry, whose bond once symbolized the future of a modern royal era. You see, the tragedy here isn't just political, it's deeply personal. Beneath the headlines, beneath the history, is a father who has lost a son, and a son who feels abandoned by the only world he ever knew. In the coming chapters, we'll uncover the events leading up to this moment, the secret reports, the private confrontations, the late-night calls that turned love into loyalty and loyalty into betrayal. Because what King Charles told his aides before signing that document will change everything you thought you knew about this family. And when you hear what happened next, you'll understand why this moment, this single act, may mark not just the end of Harry's royal story, but the beginning of a royal reckoning the world has never seen before. Because in the House of Windsor, nothing is ever what it seems. It happened in silence. The kind of silence that feels deliberate, like the world itself is holding its breath. Deep inside Buckingham Palace, under the dim glow of antique chandeliers, King Charles sat alone at his desk. It was nearly midnight. The corridors were empty, the echoes of footsteps long gone. Only the faint ticking of a grandfather clock reminded him that time was still moving, indifferent to what he was about to do. This wasn't the first time Charles had wrestled with sleepless nights. But tonight was different. Tonight wasn't about speeches, charity galas, or headlines. Tonight was about blood. His own, and how that bloodline, his family, his legacy, had begun to feel like a liability. He stared at the envelope in front of him. Thick parchment, sealed in red wax, the royal crest pressed deep into its center. A document of consequence. The kind of paper that changes history. No one else knew he was there. The Queen Consort, Camilla, had long since gone to bed after a terse exchange that left her worried and tired. "You'll regret it in the morning," she had whispered. Charles didn't respond, because deep down, he already knew he wouldn't. He wasn't angry, not exactly. He was resolved. There's a difference. Anger fades. Resolution stays until it's done. At 11:47 p.m., he opened the desk drawer and pulled out his fountain pen. It was the same pen he had used to sign his coronation documents, the same one his mother had used for her silver jubilee letters decades ago. A symbol of continuity, now being used to end it. But even as his fingers hovered above the page, his mind replayed the words that had brought him here. Words that weren't meant for the public. Words that came from a file marked highly confidential. MI6 communication briefing. He hadn't slept since reading it. The report had arrived earlier that day, delivered in a black leather folder by Sir Clive Alderton, his private secretary. "Your Majesty," Alderton had said in a hushed tone, "you'll want to see this privately." Charles had known from the look in his aide's eyes that it wasn't good news. But he wasn't prepared for what he read. Names, dates, transactions, communications that shouldn't exist, people who should never have been contacted. And at the center of it, Harry, his youngest son. He'd hoped there was a mistake, a misunderstanding. But the evidence was too detailed, too specific, too real. When he reached the final page, his heart sank. It wasn't just about Harry anymore. It was about the monarchy itself. Every line he read felt like a warning. Your son is a risk to the crown. Now, sitting in the quiet of his study, Charles could still see the words burned into his mind. He poured himself a glass of scotch, his hands trembling slightly. "He's my son," he muttered under his breath. "My own flesh and blood." But even as he said it, the voice of his father echoed in his mind. Prince Philip, stern and commanding. "Duty first, Charles. Always duty first." Duty, the word that had ruled his life since birth. The word that had cost him love, youth, freedom, and now, maybe even his son. A soft knock on the door pulled him from his thoughts. It was Sir Clive, appearing hesitant but firm. "Your Majesty, the documents you requested are ready." Charles nodded. "Leave them." Alderton placed the folder on the desk and paused, as though wanting to speak but thinking better of it. "Is there anything else, sir?" The king didn't look up. "No, Clive. That will be all." The door closed gently, and once again, Charles was alone. He opened the folder. Inside were 3 documents. 1. A formal letter to the Prime Minister informing him of the royal decision. The second, a copy of the official royal decree removing Prince Henry Charles Albert David, Duke of Sussex, from the line of succession. The third, a personal note addressed simply, "To my son." He didn't remember writing it. But there it was, in his own handwriting. each word aching with restrained emotion. He read it once more. My dear Harry, you have forced my hand in ways I never wanted. I've waited, prayed, and pleaded for change. But the damage has gone too far. This is not punishment. It is protection. Protection for the crown, for the realm, and perhaps even for you. I hope one day you'll understand that this act, though cruel in appearance, is born from necessity, not hate. Your father, Charles R. He exhaled sharply, folded the letter, and slid it back into the envelope. The clock struck 12. 12 chimes echoed through the palace halls, each one heavier than the last. Somewhere outside, the wind picked up, rattling the windows. Charles pressed his pen to the parchment. And then, for just a moment, he froze. He could see the faces of his sons. William, the steadfast heir, and Harry, the wild spirit. Diana's boys. The ones who had once followed him through palace corridors, laughing, innocent, unaware of the destiny that waited to swallow them whole. Diana, he whispered, his voice cracking. Forgive me. The pen moved. His signature flowed across the page. Charles Rex. With that single stroke, 1,000 years of royal blood met its first public fracture between a reigning monarch and his direct heir by choice, not death. He sat back in his chair, exhausted but oddly calm. It was done. The decision was irreversible. For a moment, he thought of calling Camilla, but he didn't. He knew what she'd say. That no father should disown his son, that the public would see cruelty instead of courage. But it was too late for comfort. He rang the bell for the royal messenger. Within minutes, a man in a dark uniform appeared at the door. Charles handed him the sealed decree. This must reach the Prime Minister before dawn, he said. No delays. The messenger bowed and left swiftly. Charles leaned back, the room spinning faintly. He had done what he believed was right, yet the weight of it pressed down on him like the crown itself. Was this justice, or betrayal of his own heart? As the rain began to fall harder outside, Charles stood and walked toward the window. Beyond the palace gates, London slept peacefully, unaware that history had just shifted. He thought of the boy Harry once was, the one who followed him to polo matches, who carried his mother's legacy with defiance and grace, who told jokes at times too serious to bear. That boy was gone. In his place stood a man Charles barely recognized, driven by independence, anger, and perhaps something darker. Still, even in the quiet aftermath, Charles couldn't escape one thought. What if he was wrong? He turned from the window, gripping the edge of his desk. No, he told himself. The evidence was clear. The risk was too great. He had no choice. But even kings doubt themselves when the silence grows too long. Just then, the door creaked open again. Camilla stood there in her robe, her face pale. You haven't come to bed, she said softly. It's done, Charles replied. She looked at the papers, then at him. You've really done it. He nodded. She stepped closer, her eyes searching his. And you think this will fix things? You think this will make it better? It will protect the crown, he said, his tone firm. And what about your son? Charles looked away. He made his choices. Camilla sighed. Maybe, but someday, you'll have to live with this one. She left the room without another word. The door closed behind her, leaving Charles alone once more with his decision and his ghosts. The hours crawled toward morning. The king didn't sleep. He couldn't. The image of Harry's face, when he'd eventually learn the truth, haunted him. At 4:15 a.m., the phone on his desk rang. It was a secure palace line. The voice on the other end spoke quietly. Your Majesty, the Prime Minister has received the decree. It is officially acknowledged. Thank you, Charles said, his voice barely a whisper. He hung up, and for the first time in hours, he allowed himself to exhale. Relief mingled with sorrow, triumph with regret. Outside, the first light of dawn crept across the sky, casting long shadows through the palace windows. The king stood at the threshold of his decision, knowing that when the world woke up, nothing would ever be the same again. But before dawn broke fully, another sound cut through the stillness, a soft ring from his private phone. He hesitated, then answered. Father, came the voice on the line. Quiet, tired, but unmistakable. It was Harry. Charles said nothing. Is it true? Harry asked after a pause that felt like a lifetime. Have you really done it? Charles closed his eyes. It had to be done. On the other end, silence. Then a deep breath. You've made your choice then, Harry said. But don't think I won't make mine. The line went dead. The king lowered the receiver slowly, staring into the darkness as if it might answer back. He had ended one chapter, but in doing so, he had opened another, one far more dangerous, far more unpredictable. Because if the father could wield royal power to erase a son, what could the son do when he had nothing left to lose? And that, perhaps, was what King Charles feared most. Because the decision made at midnight was not the end. It was only the beginning. The world outside Buckingham Palace was still asleep when King Charles picked up the phone. The rain had stopped, but the streets were slick with reflection. It was barely dawn, yet the decision that would shake the monarchy had already been signed, sealed, and delivered. The Prime Minister had acknowledged it. The machinery of government had begun to turn. But there was one person Charles hadn't spoken to, one person he owed an explanation to, even if it would only make things worse. Prince Harry. The call wasn't planned. No aides were present. No secretaries hovering nearby to record the details for the palace archives. It was just a father and a son, separated by oceans, pride, and the weight of 1,000 years of royal duty. Charles hesitated before dialing. He'd stared at the number for nearly 10 minutes, wondering if it was cowardice to let Harry find out through the press. But something inside him, perhaps guilt, perhaps old love, made him press the button. The line rang twice, then 3 times. Finally, a voice answered, rough and groggy. "Hello, Harry," Charles said quietly. A pause. Then, suspiciously, "Who is this?" "It's me," the king said. "It's your father." The silence that followed wasn't the kind of silence that comes from surprise. It was colder, heavier. The silence of someone who has built walls and isn't sure whether to let you in. "What do you want?" Harry finally asked. Charles took a deep breath. "I thought it best that you hear it from me before it reaches the news." Harry laughed bitterly. "Oh, there's news? Let me guess. Another article about how Meghan's the villain of the century? Or maybe something about how we're bankrupting Britain by existing." "Harry," Charles said, trying to stay calm. "This isn't about the tabloids." Harry's tone sharpened. "Then what is it about, Dad?" Charles swallowed hard. "It's official. You've been removed from the line of succession. Your titles, your remaining ones, are revoked." There was no response at first, only the faint sound of breathing on the other end of the line. Then came a short, disbelieving laugh. "You're joking." "I wish I were." The line went quiet again. Then, "So that's it? You signed a piece of paper and erased your son?" "It's not that simple," Charles said. "There are matters beyond personal feeling, matters of state, of security." "Security?" Harry interrupted, his voice rising. "You mean the same security that cut me off when I needed it most? The same one that left my family exposed because I wouldn't play the palace game?" "Harry, please," Charles said, almost pleading. "You know this isn't easy for me." Harry scoffed. "You keep saying that like it means something. You made your choice, Dad. You always do." Charles tried to steady his voice. "I read something. Information that leaves me no choice. Things that I can't ignore, not as king." Harry's voice hardened. "Oh, I see. So the intelligence services are dictating family decisions now." "This isn't about politics, Harry. It's about trust." "Trust," Harry repeated. "You think I'm a threat? Your own son?" "I think," Charles hesitated. "I think there are forces around you. People who don't have your best interests at heart." Harry let out a long, low breath. "You mean Meghan?" Charles didn't answer. "Just say it," Harry snapped. "You've wanted to say it since the wedding." "This isn't about her," Charles said. "It's about what's become of us. You've turned away from everything we stand for." "Everything you stand for," Harry corrected. "Control, silence, image, the institution before the individual. Do you even hear yourself?" Charles felt the heat rising in his face. "You think you're the only one who's suffered? The only one who's felt trapped? I've lived my entire life waiting to be allowed to live it." Harry didn't respond immediately. Then, with a quiet bitterness, he said, "And now that you have power, you're doing the same thing that was done to you." Those words hit Charles like a punch. For a moment, he said nothing. Then he replied, voice trembling, "Perhaps that's what it takes to survive in this family." "Survive," Harry repeated softly. "At what cost?" For a long time, neither of them spoke. The connection hummed faintly, a fragile thread between two worlds that had once been inseparable. Charles could almost see him. The red hair, the stubborn expression, Diana's eyes filled with the same defiance she had once shown him. It was like talking to a ghost. I didn't want this, Charles said finally. But what's been revealed to me leaves no room for choice. Harry's tone turned icy. What was revealed? You know I can't tell you that. So that's it, Harry said. You believe some faceless report over your own son. It's not about belief, it's about evidence. Harry laughed, a sound that was half disbelief, half heartbreak. You really have become the monarchy, haven't you? Cold, mechanical, obsessed with appearances. Do you even remember what it means to be a father? Harry, Charles said softly, I am still your father. No, Harry said. You're the king. That's what you are now. Charles tried to respond, but Harry's words cut him off again. You know what the worst part is? Harry continued. For years, I tried to prove I could do it differently. That I could serve, that I could still make you proud. But nothing was ever enough. You didn't want a son, you wanted a soldier. That's not true, isn't it? You chose the crown over Mom. Over me. Over all of us. Charles's hand tightened around the receiver. That's not fair. Fair. Harry laughed again. When has anything about this family ever been fair? There was a pause. Harry's voice softened just slightly. Did you at least talk to William before you did it? Charles hesitated. He knows. Of course he does, Harry said. The perfect heir always knows. The bitterness in his voice was unmistakable. Charles winced, not because the words were cruel, but because they were true. He had told William. He had even sought his counsel. But in doing so, he'd made the wound deeper, confirming what Harry had always suspected, that his brother's loyalty was valued more than his own. I hope you understand one day, Charles said quietly. This wasn't done out of spite. It was done to protect something greater than any one of us. The crown, Harry said. The country. The brand, Harry shot back. That's all it is now, isn't it? A brand. A logo. A PR machine. Charles rubbed his forehead. You sound like someone who's forgotten what duty means. Harry's response was immediate. And you sound like someone who's forgotten what love is. Those words landed like a knife. For a moment, Charles thought he might hang up. Instead, he whispered, You've made choices, Harry. I warned you they'd have consequences. And I warned you I wouldn't live my life as your pawn. There was a pause, long enough for both of them to realize there was no going back. Finally, Harry's tone shifted again, lower now. You know, Dad, for years I wanted to believe we could fix this, that there was still something left of us. But every time I reached out, you pulled away. And now, you've finished the job. Charles clenched his jaw. You may hate me for this. Perhaps one day, you'll understand. Harry's voice hardened. Don't flatter yourself. I don't hate you. I pity you. Before Charles could respond, the line went dead. He sat there for a long time, staring at the receiver as though it might come back to life. But the silence stayed. The kind of silence that doesn't end when you hang up. It echoes, it lingers, it becomes part of you. Somewhere in California, Harry stood in the middle of his kitchen, the phone still in his hand, the call history blinking back at him. Meghan entered, still in her robe, confusion written on her face. Who was that? She asked. Harry didn't answer at first. Then he said, It's done. What's done? He looked up, his eyes hollow. He's taken everything. Meghan froze. What do you mean? He signed it. It's official. I'm out. She stepped closer, placing her hand on his arm. He can't just. He did, Harry said flatly. Titles, succession, everything. Gone. She stared at him, unsure what to say. There has to be something we can do. Legally, through the courts. Harry shook his head. It's not a legal matter. It's royal decree. It's done. For a moment, they both stood there, the reality of it sinking in. Then Meghan's voice dropped to a whisper. So that's it. We're free. But Harry didn't look free. He looked lost. Free. He repeated softly, as if testing the word. Yeah, I suppose so. Back in London, Charles set the receiver down and pressed his hands to his face. His temples throbbed. He could still hear Harry's voice, angry, wounded, and final. You're not my father. You're the king. For the first time that night, Charles let the tears come. Not the tears of a monarch or a statesman, but of a man who had just realized that power doesn't heal what it breaks. Minutes later, the intercom buzzed. Your Majesty, came Sir Clive's voice. The official statement draft is ready for your review. Charles wiped his face quickly. Have it sent to my office. Right away, sir. The king rose, straightened his jacket, and stared at his reflection in the window. The sky was lightening now, the first traces of morning gold peeking over the horizon. Somewhere out there, cameras were being set up, reporters rehearsing their lines, the entire world waiting for the news he already knew would define his reign. He whispered to himself, "God help us all." But deep down, even as the sun rose, he couldn't shake one thought, a thought that would haunt him in the days to come. Because that call with Harry wasn't just an ending. It was a beginning. Somewhere, across the ocean, a prince was no longer bound by duty, title, or loyalty. And a man with nothing left to lose is the most dangerous kind of man there is. What came next would test the monarchy in ways even the king couldn't imagine. And it all began with a call that changed everything. It began as a whisper. One of those discreet palace murmurs that starts behind closed doors, between polished boots and perfectly ironed uniforms, before seeping through the cracks of royal walls. "The king has the file," someone said. "A dossier. From MI6. At first, it sounded like rumor. After all, Buckingham Palace had weathered every imaginable scandal. Affairs, leaks, betrayals, divorces. But this was different. This was national. The story starts 3 days before the midnight decree. The morning was crisp, London draped in its usual fog. At precisely 9:02 a.m., an unmarked black car entered the palace gates. Inside sat Sir Malcolm Wren, Deputy Director of the British Secret Intelligence Service, MI6 to the rest of the world. His visit wasn't on the schedule. No cameras, no press, not even the usual royal security had been briefed. Only one man knew why he was there, the king himself. Charles had received a private message late the previous evening. 3 words that chilled him to his core. "It's about Harry." In the quiet of the palace's private briefing room, Sir Malcolm handed over a folder sealed with a crimson stripe. His voice was low but precise. "Your Majesty, what's in here has been verified through multiple channels. It concerns communications, financial transfers, and potential associations that raise serious constitutional implications." Charles didn't touch the folder at first. He just stared at it. The red stripe, the highest level of national confidentiality, hadn't been used in a royal matter since the abdication crisis of 1936. "Are you certain this is accurate?" the king asked finally. "As certain as we ever are," Malcolm replied. "We've cross-referenced data across European and American intelligence. Nothing here is speculative." The folder felt heavier than paper when Charles finally lifted it. He dismissed the intelligence chief, muttering a curt, "Thank you, Malcolm." The door closed behind him, leaving the king alone. He opened it slowly, almost unwillingly, the way a man might open a letter he already knows will destroy him. Inside, a series of reports, coded transcripts, emails, bank transfer records, images. But it was the summary on top, the executive overview, that made the king's throat go dry. It read, "Subject, Prince Henry Charles Albert David, Duke of Sussex. Summary. Subject has been in contact with multiple individuals of foreign interest. These interactions appear to include both informal communications and structured engagements, with potential implications for the British Crown. Recommendation: immediate internal review and containment." Charles's hand trembled as he turned the page. The details were clinical, detached, yet devastating. Dates, locations, private meetings in Los Angeles and Montecito. Encrypted phone calls routed through Swiss servers. Financial transfers from obscure entities labeled as consulting retainers. And at the center of several entries was a name the king recognized. A name that had surfaced once before in quiet government circles. A man with connections to controversial political figures and influence networks the British government had worked hard to distance itself from. According to the dossier, this individual had met with Harry on at least 2 occasions under the guise of philanthropic collaboration. But buried within the text was a disturbing note from MI6 analysts. Possible attempts to solicit sensitive royal information regarding security protocols and asset movements. Charles leaned back in his chair, eyes fixed on the words but not really seeing them. He could feel the old ache behind his temples, the same one he used to get during arguments with Diana. The same one that came with stress he couldn't name. Was this possible? Could his own son, his Harry, be so careless? Or worse, complicit? He flipped to the next section, Interception Summary. It contained fragments of intercepted communications, voice transcripts, email snippets, One line stood out immediately. He says he still has access, just needs to find a way to confirm it without raising flags. Access? To what? Charles's stomach tightened. The next page clarified. Context indicates reference to internal royal documents and contacts. He slammed the folder shut, heart pounding. No, he whispered to himself. He wouldn't. But the file wasn't finished with him. Under a section labeled Visual Attachments, Charles found several photographs. They appeared to be surveillance stills, grainy, time-stamped, and confidential. The first few were mundane. Harry walking through a hotel lobby, Harry dining outdoors with friends, Harry leaving a meeting room with his security team. Then came one that made Charles freeze. The image was clear enough to show Harry shaking hands with a man whose face was partially obscured, but recognizable. The man was a known intermediary for a foreign lobbying network previously investigated for covert influence operations in Europe. In the image, Harry was smiling. The caption beneath it read, "Meeting captured, private engagement, Santa Barbara, June 12, 2024. Duration, 57 minutes. Charles's chest tightened. He turned the page and saw another note, handwritten by an MI6 officer. Unclear whether subject aware of full background of contact. Intelligence suggests introductions facilitated by external consultant, name redacted. He didn't realize he was gripping the edges of the folder until his knuckles went white. That was when the phone rang. "Your Majesty," came Sir Clive Alderton's voice, cautious but steady. "You asked to be notified once Sir Malcolm departed. Shall I arrange a follow-up briefing?" "No," Charles said quietly. "That won't be necessary. I have what I need." He hung up. For a few moments, the king sat perfectly still. The palace felt suddenly colder, the air heavier. He could hear the muffled footsteps of guards outside, the distant clink of silver from the kitchens, the faint rumble of traffic beyond the gates. But all he could think of was the image, the handshake, the smile, the timestamp. He thought back to his mother, Queen Elizabeth II, and how she'd handled crises of trust. She had always believed in restraint, patience, quiet strength. But Charles wasn't his mother. His reign was already under siege, from public scrutiny, from dwindling support, from whispers that he lacked the firmness to protect the crown's dignity. And now, it seemed, the threat was not from Parliament, not from the press, but from within his own bloodline. For hours, Charles reread the file, his mind spiraling between disbelief and duty. He wanted to find loopholes, to tell himself the intelligence was wrong, that this was some elaborate misunderstanding. But every piece of evidence corroborated the next. Every page made the truth harder to deny. At 3 p.m., he summoned Sir Clive. "Lock the doors," Charles said. The secretary obeyed without question. Charles pushed the folder across the desk. "Read this. Then tell me I'm wrong." Sir Clive took the folder, his brow furrowed. As he skimmed the contents, his expression shifted from confusion to alarm to grim resignation. When he finally looked up, he said softly, "This cannot leave this room." "It already has," Charles replied. "MI6 has copies. The Prime Minister's office is aware." Sir Clive nodded slowly. "Then there's only one course of action, Your Majesty." Charles stared at him. "Yes," he said. "I know." For a long time, neither spoke. The only sound was the faint hum of rain against the glass. Then Charles whispered, "He's left me no choice." That night, while the rest of London enjoyed quiet dinner hours, the king sat alone once more, staring at the dossier. Each photograph, each document felt like a betrayal inked in black and white. And yet, even through his anger, another feeling crept in, something colder, something he didn't want to name. Fear. Because if this information ever became public, if even a fraction of it leaked, it wouldn't just damage Harry. It would damage the monarchy itself. The media would devour it. The political opposition would use it to call for reform, or worse, republic. The fragile unity his mother had built over 70 years could crumble in a single news cycle. So, Charles made his decision. He summoned a handful of trusted advisors. The order was clear: prepare a royal decree. Effective immediately, the Duke of Sussex is to be removed from the line of succession. All remaining honorary titles are to be rescinded. This must remain confidential until I say otherwise. As he spoke, his aides exchanged nervous glances. One of them, an older statesman who had served under both Elizabeth and Philip, cleared his throat. "Your Majesty," Once this is done, there's no turning back. Charles looked up, his eyes hollow but determined. There's no turning back anyway. When they left, Charles remained in his study, the folder open before him. He turned back to the photograph, the handshake, the smile, and for a fleeting second, he saw not the potential scandal, not the national risk, but the boy Harry once was, running across the palace lawn, laughing, his mother's spirit in every gesture. He whispered, "What happened to you?" But the paper offered no answer. He closed the folder, sealing its contents with a trembling hand. Then he stood, walked to the window, and stared out into the fog that swallowed the London skyline. Somewhere beyond that mist was a sun he no longer recognized. And though Charles didn't know it yet, that same night, an unnamed palace aide would leak the existence of the dossier to someone outside the palace, setting in motion a chain of events that would soon make the unthinkable public. For now, though, the king believed the matter was contained, controlled. He was wrong, because by the time the sun rose again, another revelation, hidden deep within that same dossier, would reach Prince William. And when he saw it, he would demand something of his father that would tear the royal family apart. But that's the story of the next chapter. Because one photograph wasn't the end of the truth, it was only the beginning. It sat there, silent, haunting, undeniable. A single photograph, printed on glossy paper and clipped to the front of the MI6 dossier that now lay on King Charles's desk like a loaded weapon. He had stared at it so long that the details were beginning to blur, yet the image itself refused to let him go. Prince Harry, standing outside a discreet hotel in Santa Barbara, his expression casual, unaware that a single click of a camera would change the course of royal history. Beside him stood a man dressed in a dark linen suit, sunglasses half lowered, his hand extended in a firm handshake. The timestamp printed at the bottom read, June 12, 2024, 1843 local time. The stranger's name was blacked out in the dossier, but Charles already knew who he was. Everyone in government circles did. He was a known intermediary, an advisor with connections to a network that had long been flagged for attempting to exert quiet influence over Western institutions. The man had been under discreet watch for nearly 5 years. And there he was, smiling beside the king's son. Charles's pulse thudded in his temples. He looked closer, hoping to find ambiguity, to convince himself the man wasn't who he thought. But the image was too clear. Behind the figures, faint but visible, was the insignia of a private conference venue. He'd been told it was a philanthropic roundtable. Yet MI6's note said otherwise. Meeting facilitated under pretense of charity initiative. Financial discussions indicate potential exchange of influence and information. Subject, Prince Harry, unaware of surveillance. Unaware. That one word offered Charles little comfort. In the world of monarchy and geopolitics, ignorance could be as dangerous as guilt. The door opened softly. Sir Clive Alderton entered, his expression drawn. "Your Majesty," he said, "you asked to be notified when the report analysis was complete." Charles didn't look up. "And the contacts have been verified. There's no forgery, no manipulation. The photographs, communications, and financial links are all legitimate." Charles's hand tightened around the photo. "And William? Has he seen this?" "Not yet, sir," Clive said carefully. "But he's requested a private audience. He was informed that you received an intelligence briefing regarding family matters." Charles closed his eyes for a moment. "He knows more than I wanted him to." Sir Clive hesitated. "Do you wish to brief him personally?" Charles sighed. "Yes, it's time he saw the truth. But God help us both when he does." When Prince William arrived that evening, the palace was eerily still. It was after dinner, and most of the staff had retired. The brothers hadn't spoken in months. William knew that. And now, as he approached his father's private study, he had no idea what to expect, only that something monumental had happened. He knocked once. "Enter," came his father's voice. The room smelled of paper, ink, and scotch. Charles was seated by the fire, the dossier open on the table beside him. Without a word, he gestured for his son to sit. William obeyed, his expression tight with suspicion. "What's going on?" he asked. Charles didn't answer immediately. Instead, he slid the photograph across the table. "Take a look at this." William picked it up. The moment his eyes focused, his entire posture changed. His shoulders stiffened. His jaw clenched. "Where did this come from?" he demanded. MI6, Charles replied softly. 3 days ago. William stared at the photo again. That man. Yes, Charles interrupted. You recognize him? William nodded grimly. He's been under watch for years. He's not the kind of person anyone in our family should be near. Charles leaned forward. And yet, there he is. Your brother. Meeting him. Smiling. For a moment, neither spoke. The only sound was the crackling fire. Finally, William set the photograph down, his voice low but fierce. So what are you going to do about it? Charles looked weary, defeated. What can I do? He's already beyond my reach. Beyond my control. Then you need to act, William said. Before this destroys everything. The king looked up sharply. You think I haven't considered that? You think I haven't lain awake every night for months wondering how to fix this? I think you've been too afraid to do what's necessary, William said coldly. That struck a nerve. Afraid. Charles echoed. You think this is fear? I'm trying to balance the future of the crown with the life of my son. That's not cowardice. That's torment. Then end the torment, William said. He's made his choice, father. You have to make yours. Charles rose abruptly. You sound like Parliament, he said. Do you even hear yourself? William stood too, refusing to back down. I sound like someone who still believes the crown means something. Every headline about Harry and Meghan makes a mockery of our family. Every documentary, every podcast, every photograph like this erodes what little respect we have left. Charles's voice rose. He's your brother. William shot back. He stopped being my brother the day he sold our mother's legacy for a Netflix contract. The silence that followed was suffocating. Charles turned away, his hands gripping the edge of his desk. You don't understand, he said quietly. There's more to this than reputation. If this information leaks, if anyone connects his meetings to matters of state, it could raise questions of national security. The monarchy itself could be seen as compromised. William's tone hardened. Then remove him. Officially. Strip the titles. End the speculation. Charles turned back, his face pale. You'd have me erase my son? William met his gaze without flinching. If that's what it takes to save the crown, yes. The words hung heavy in the room. For a moment, the king saw something of himself in William. The same cold calculation he'd spent a lifetime trying to temper. But unlike his father, William didn't hesitate. This family doesn't survive half measures, William said. You know what must be done. Charles sank into his chair, the photo still burning in his mind. Do you have any idea what it means to disinherit a son? To strip him from the succession line? It's not just symbolic, it's exile. Then exile him, William said flatly. Because if you don't, he'll bring the entire monarchy down with him. Charles looked up slowly. Do you truly believe that? I do, William said. And so will the country when they see what's in that file. The king exhaled heavily. You sound so certain. I am, William said. And I'm not the only one. The archbishop has already been briefed. The cabinet will support your decision. Charles's expression darkened. You've spoken to the archbishop? He reached out to me, William said. He's worried, father. The Church of England's position depends on the integrity of the crown. He said this. He nodded toward the dossier. Cannot go unresolved. Charles rubbed his temples. My God. For a long moment, both men stood in silence. Then, softly, the king said, when your brother was born, your mother held him in her arms and said he'd be the one to change everything. And she was right, just not in the way she imagined. William didn't respond. Charles picked up the photograph again, staring at it as if it might speak. Then, finally, he whispered, very well. I'll do it. William's voice softened. It's the right decision. But Charles wasn't listening anymore. He was staring at the photo, seeing not the man in the linen suit or the alleged scandal, but the look on Harry's face. The boy he'd once known, grinning, mischievous, full of life. Somewhere between childhood and exile, that boy had vanished. And now, the king was preparing to make sure he could never return. Tell the council, Charles said. We'll meet tomorrow. The papers will be drafted before the week ends. William nodded. Understood. He turned to leave, but paused at the door. You're doing what's right, father. Don't doubt that. Charles gave a hollow nod. I only wish right didn't feel so wrong. When William left, the king sat back down. The fire had died to embers. He looked again at the photo, at the handshake that had sealed more than one fate, and slipped it back into the folder. He rang for Sir Clive. Yes, Your Majesty? Prepare the drafts, Charles said. Everything we discussed earlier. Full removal. Immediate effect after council approval. Sir Clive hesitated. And the photograph. Destroy every copy, Charles said. No one outside this circle sees it. Ever. As you wish. But of course, secrets in royal circles never stay buried. Someone always talks. And as that photograph disappeared from one file, a duplicate began its quiet journey beyond palace walls, to a journalist with powerful friends and a hunger for truth. For now, the king believed the danger was contained. But in truth, the image had already become something else entirely. A weapon. A spark that would ignite a storm not even the monarchy could control. And when that storm came, no title, no decree, and no bloodline would be enough to stop it. Because the photograph that was meant to be destroyed would soon make its way into the wrong hands, and the person who saw it next would demand something that would split the royal family forever. But that, as fate would have it, was only the beginning of the unraveling. The next morning broke gray and heavy over London. A damp mist clung to the cobblestones as the city stirred awake, unaware that the monarchy itself was about to be thrust into its greatest reckoning since the abdication crisis. Inside Buckingham Palace, the air was tense. Servants whispered, corridors echoed faintly, and the guards outside, always stoic, seemed even more still than usual. The king hadn't slept. The decision to strip Harry of his titles and remove him from the line of succession was now set in motion, but the weight of it pressed against his chest like iron. He had hoped that, after their heated discussion the night before, William would calm down, that reason might prevail. But when the knock came on his office door that morning, it was clear William hadn't come for peace. "Come in," Charles said, already bracing himself. The door opened, and in stepped the Prince of Wales, his heir, his firstborn, the man who would one day wear the very crown now sitting on his father's head. William's jaw was tight, his stride brisk. He didn't bow. He didn't smile. He didn't waste time with greetings. "Father, we need to talk," he said flatly. Charles gestured toward the chair opposite his desk. "Then sit, William. Let's talk." But William didn't sit. He remained standing, arms crossed, his expression a mix of determination and fury. "I've given you a night to think," he began. "Tell me you're not hesitating." Charles sighed, weary. "I am thinking. That's what kings do before they act. We don't execute decisions like generals on a battlefield. This is a battlefield," William snapped. "Every headline, every broadcast. Harry has turned our family into a spectacle. You saw the dossier. You saw the photograph. You know what this means. And yet you're still hesitating?" Charles's eyes narrowed. "You speak as though I don't understand the stakes. Do you think I enjoy this? Do you think I want to disown my own son?" William's voice sharpened. "Then prove it's not personal. Prove it's for the crown. Do what must be done." The king rose from his seat. "You presume to lecture me on duty," he said, his voice suddenly carrying the weight of authority. "You, who have had the luxury of watching me carry this burden for decades while you criticize from afar." "This isn't about me," William said coldly. "It's about the survival of the monarchy. Every day Harry and Meghan are out there trading royal secrets for publicity. Every interview chips away at what little trust the public still has in us. We can't let him drag the institution down with him." Charles walked to the window, his reflection blurred against the rain-streaked glass. "You speak like a man who's already king," he murmured. "Someone has to," William replied. The words hung in the air, bold and dangerous. Charles turned sharply. "Be very careful, William." William didn't flinch. "I'm not challenging you, father. I'm trying to save what's left." Charles studied his son for a long moment. The resemblance was striking, the same steely eyes, the same stubborn chin. For the first time, he realized William wasn't just his heir. He was his mirror. And mirrors, Charles knew, could be cruel. Finally, the king spoke. "You want me to strip your brother of his titles, to erase him from the line of succession, to make it official, irreversible." "Yes," William said, "for the good of the monarchy, for the good of the country." "And what happens," Charles asked, "when history looks back and calls this cruelty? When they say we turn on our own?" "Then let them say it," William said without hesitation. "Better they call you cruel than weak." That line hit its mark. Charles turned away, his jaw tightening. Weak, the one word that had haunted him his entire life. His critics had used it. His detractors whispered it. Even Diana had said it once. "You're too gentle for this world. Charles. Weakness was the shadow that followed him into every decision, every public appearance. And now, his own son was throwing it in his face. Be careful what you wish for, Charles said finally. Once we do this, there's no undoing it. We are not removing a staff member, William. We are removing family. Blood. Then maybe blood isn't enough anymore, William said, his voice cold and certain. Charles stared at him, shocked by the harshness in his tone. You forget yourself, he said softly. No, William replied, stepping closer. I've never seen things more clearly. I watched what happened to Mother. I saw how she tried to protect us. How the same institution you're defending now chewed her up and spat her out. But she believed in something bigger than herself. And I do too. You can't save Harry, father. You can only save the crown. Charles sank into his chair, exhausted. And if saving the crown means destroying what's left of our family? William's answer came without hesitation. Then it's a price we have to pay. For a long moment, there was only silence. The kind that stretches, heavy and suffocating, between two people who love each other but can't find the same truth. Finally, Charles said, your brother will never forgive me. William's eyes hardened. He already hasn't. Charles turned his gaze toward the flickering fireplace. I sometimes wonder, he said quietly, if he's more like his mother than either of us ever realized. William's face softened for the first time. Maybe he is. But she never betrayed the crown. Not like this. That word, betrayal, hung in the room like a curse. Charles looked up at his son. You don't understand, he said. Harry isn't a villain. He's lost. He's searching for something outside of all this pomp and duty that we were born into. Something human. Something real. William's reply was firm. Then he should have looked for it privately, not on television. Charles exhaled, defeated. You really think stripping him of everything will fix this? I think it's the only way to remind the world that the monarchy still means something, William said. If we let this go unpunished, it sets a precedent that any royal can defy the crown and keep their privileges. That's not a family, that's anarchy. The king rubbed his forehead. He could feel the old ache returning, the dull, throbbing pain that always came with impossible decisions. Finally, he said, you're asking me to choose between my sons. No, William said quietly. I'm asking you to choose between your son and your crown. The room went still. The sound of the rain outside faded, as though even the world itself was holding its breath. Charles looked down at the desk before him, where the royal decree lay waiting for his final approval. The gold-edged paper seemed to gleam with judgment. He reached for his pen, then stopped. You know, he said softly, when I was your age, I promised myself I'd never be the kind of father who put the institution before his children. And now? William asked. Charles hesitated. Now I understand why my father did. The words felt like ash in his mouth, but they were true. He signed. The pen scratched across the parchment, final and unforgiving. With that single motion, the king formalized what had only been spoken of in secret: Prince Harry's removal from royal succession and the revocation of his remaining titles. When he finished, Charles pushed the document across the desk toward his son. There, he said quietly. It's done. William stared at the paper. For a moment, he didn't speak. Then, with a subtle nod, he said, history will remember this as the moment the monarchy survived. Charles shook his head. History will remember this as the moment a father lost both his sons. William looked away. That's not true. But the conviction in his voice had wavered. He turned toward the door. Before leaving, he paused and said, we'll handle the announcement carefully. The public will need to see strength, not sorrow. Charles didn't respond. When the door closed, the king leaned back, staring at the signature that had cost him his peace. He thought of Diana again, of the nights she had cried alone, of her defiance, her warmth, her endless fight for her children. He wondered what she would say now, seeing her family fractured beyond repair. He whispered to the empty room, you were right, Diana. They will eat us alive. Outside, thunder rumbled faintly over London. Inside, the King of England sat alone, the ink still drying on a decision that would alter the monarchy forever. And while the fire flickered and died, somewhere across the world, that very same decision was already beginning to leak, because secrets that powerful never stay hidden for long. One of William's aides, frustrated by the coldness of the meeting and convinced that the people deserved to know, had sent an encrypted message to a trusted journalist. The words were simple, almost careless. "It's done. The Duke of Sussex is no more." By dawn, that message would ignite a media storm. And in California, a phone would ring again. This time, not from the king, but from the press. Because what came next would push Prince Harry to his breaking point, and the world was about to witness a royal war like no other.